Hey, I'm Jamie East, and today's episode of The Smart 7's brought to you by your nectar prices at Sainsbury's. These days it's hard to find value for money on your weekly shop, right? Well, maybe you're doing it wrong. You need to unlock the magic of your nectar prices at Sainsbury's. Every Friday, you can unlock up to 10 personalised discounts on things you love in the Nectar app. And the best part is that while nectar prices are for everyone, your nectar prices are just for you. So check your Nectar app and unlock your nectar prices to save more now. Enjoy your own personalised discount on things you love with your nectar prices at Sainsbury's. That's good food for all of us. The offer's for 18 plus, Nectar app required. Unlock up to 10 your nectar prices weekly. Available in supermarkets, online and in locals with Smart Shop. T's and C's apply.
It's Saturday the 11th of October. I'm Ciara Evans, and this was a week that saw a peace deal agreed for Gaza. The Tories gather for their conference in Manchester, a devastating diagnosis for an England rugby star, and tributes paid to two entertainment icons.
Grab a cup of something hot, put up your feet, and get up to speed on the 7 biggest stories of the week. This is the Standout 7 from the Smart 7.
It's news,
But not the news.
This week has seen the situation in Gaza move quickly as Donald Trump applied pressure to both sides to agree to his 20-point peace plan. Last weekend saw early signs of progress as Hamas agreed to 3 of the points: the release of all hostages, the surrendering of power and the withdrawal of Israeli troops, but have said the remainder will need to be agreed with other Palestinian parties as part of a collective national stance. It was seen as a step forward, however, and talks began on Monday with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sounding optimistic.
We are on the verge of a very significant achievement. We are working on it diligently, and I hope, God willing, that in the coming days I will be able to announce the return of all our hostages.
Donald Trump weighed in with a warning to Hamas they'll be faced with complete obliteration if they fail to carry through. An Israeli spokesperson, David Mencer, says that once the hostages are released, Israel will be happy to comply with the other terms and conditions.
It is now all eyes on Hamas. Will this dastardly terrorist organisation indeed go ahead and release our hostages? Will they indeed lay down their arms? Will they indeed provide some respite for their own people?
Indirect peace talks to end the Gaza conflict got underway on Monday in the Egyptian city of Sharm el-Sheikh. Egyptian and Qatari negotiators were engaging in parallel discussions with Hamas and Israeli delegations as the pressure was on to agree to the US 20-point plan for peace. Tuesday marked the 2nd anniversary of the Hamas attack on Israel that sparked the war, and Israel continued its military campaign in Gaza City on Monday. Greta Thunberg and her fellow flotilla members were deported to Greece by Israel after another failed attempt to deliver aid to Gaza, and the Swedish activist hinted at rough treatment while in captivity, but was staying focused on the flotilla's main goal.
That this mission has to exist is a shame. What happened here was that Israel, while continuing to worsen and escalate their genocide, they once again violated international law by preventing humanitarian aid.
UNICEF's global spokesman James Elder says the living conditions in Gaza are unbearable and people are desperately hoping for an end to the fighting.
80-85% of families are within 10 metres of open sewerage or animal waste or stagnant water, and 2/3 of them don't have access to soap. People are well aware of what it looks like in the south and that these so-called safe zones regularly get bombed.
Talks continued in Egypt on Tuesday between a Hamas delegation and an Israeli delegation mediated by Qatar, with Donald Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff expected to arrive to help speed up the process. Israel's opposition leader Yair Lapid said there's no obstacle to the deal on the Israeli side.
Prime Minister Netanyahu has a security net from the opposition in order to do the deal, and there's no political obstacles whatsoever in doing this deal, and therefore it has to happen.
The UK saw protests take place in support of Palestine despite requests to cancel them from Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson, who was campaigning to be Labour Deputy Leader, also felt Tuesday was not the day for protests.
There is much more that we need to do to tackle anti-Semitism in our society, and I've heard directly from Jewish students
about the impact that this has been having, and that's why it is essential that universities do more and act to protect students.
Late on Wednesday night, a preliminary agreement was reached between Israel and Hamas for a ceasefire in Gaza. According to the White House, Hamas is set to release the 20 living hostages, while Israel begins to release Palestinian prisoners. There'll be a dramatic increase in aid too, with 400 trucks a day to be allowed to enter Gaza. Hamas had confirmed the deal, and there were celebrations in Gaza at the prospect of an end to fighting. But it is clear that this is not the final deal, just a ceasefire initially. President Trump was handed a note by Secretary of State Marco Rubio during a press event, and he intends to travel to the Middle East this week to seal the deal. He spoke to Sean Hannity on Fox News.
I spoke to Bibi Netanyahu just a little while ago. He called, he said, "I can't believe it." He said, "Everybody's liking me now." I said, "Israel cannot fight the world, Bibi. They can't fight the world." And he understands that very well.
Friday morning saw growing optimism as Israel's cabinet signed off on a deal, and preparations began for the release of the 20 hostages who are still alive and held by Hamas. The ceasefire is set to come into effect upon approval of the deal by the Israeli cabinet. Israeli government spokesperson Shosh Bedrosian laid out the timeline on Thursday evening, explaining that within 72 hours of the ceasefire taking effect, it was expected the hostages would be released. She was happy to give Donald Trump the credit too.
The great relationship between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump is reflected in this plan. And we could not have reached this point without the magnificent relationship between the two of them.
Trump has high hopes that the Nobel Peace Prize Committee will be paying close attention regardless. The deal has attracted praise and relief from world leaders. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says all sides need to keep the deal on track.
We have all waited far too long for this moment. Now we must make it truly count. I urge all parties to fully abide by the terms of the agreement and to fully embrace the opportunities it presents.
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer was in India on Thursday, where he was talking up the new trade deal with India, which he says is a superpower in the making. He also met with Indian PM Narendra Modi and discussed the war in Ukraine. At the press conference, there were plenty of questions about the Gaza peace deal, and while Starmer praised Donald Trump's leadership, he didn't get dragged into a discussion on the Nobel Peace Prize.
This is a moment of profound relief that we felt around the world, but particularly for the hostages, their families, and for the civilian population of Gaza.
Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper was equally pleased to see a potential end to the war and was calling for all sides to move through the phases so that humanitarian aid can begin to flow and restoration work can begin.
After 2 years of the most devastating suffering, with tens of thousands of lives being lost, with the pain of hostages held for so long, the agreement now to a ceasefire is immensely important and must be implemented as swiftly as possible.
This week saw the Tories' annual conference in Manchester, with the party under increasing pressure from Reform, who seem to be regularly hoovering up high-profile Tories and their donors. The conference included a tribute to former Tory Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, celebrating 100 years since her birth. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch was making headlines on Sunday for her focus on immigration and a new proposal which would see the creation of a removals force modelled on Donald Trump's ICE, which would have a remit to deport 150,000 people per year. She's also prepared to pull the UK out of international treaties and the European Court of Human Rights, citing some unusual examples to prove her point.
America is not in that agreement. Australia is not in that agreement. Canada is not in that agreement. You don't need to be in that convention to have human rights. Our human rights existed long before the ECHR.
Monday saw Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride announce that he and the Tories have found £47 billion worth of savings in the last 12 months, which they intend to use to give £5,000 tax rebate to first-time homebuyers and to abolish rates for businesses.
As a direct result of getting public spending under control, a future Conservative government will completely abolish business rates for shops and pubs on our high streets. End of!
He seems to have forgotten about the famous black hole in the public finances under the Tories. New polling suggests that most Tory members don't want to see Kemi Badenoch as leader at the next election, and just over 60% of members would be happy with a Tory reform voting pact. Robert Jenrick, who has hopes of being the next leader, was happy to rule out a coalition, however.
What we've got to do as a party is change. We've got to learn the lessons of the past. We let people down when we were in office. We've got to learn the lessons, change the party and win those people back.
If the Tories were worried that no one would notice their conference was on this week, Robert Jenrick made sure on Tuesday that it was front page news. He was accused of fueling a fire of toxic nationalism over comments made about a visit to Birmingham. His original comment made in March was that he didn't see another white face on a visit to Handsworth and that he didn't want to live in a country with no integration. Despite a storm of criticism and accusations of racism, he doubled down on Tuesday evening.
Look, I don't resolve from those comments. I said this is not about the colour of someone's skin or the faith that they abide by. I want to live in a country which is well integrated. Now,
Stride was the only senior figure to criticise him, while Tory leader Kemi Badenoch said with no sense of irony that a lack of integration leads us to a dark place as a country. Meanwhile, Shadow Home Secretary Chris Phillips was floating a new idea to enable the UK to break with the European Court of Human Rights, proposal that judges should be elected. He says activist judges are slowing down the process of deportations.
Where you have things like the ECHR being very broadly and expansively interpreted by the courts in a way that stops Parliament and stops the government doing what the public has elected them to do, that poses, I think, a problem for democracy.
Wednesday saw the Tory Conference in Manchester wrap up with a keynote speech from leader Kemi Badenoch. There were a host of new policies announced, including the abolition of stamp duty and a ban on doctors' strikes, along with massive cuts to welfare and restrictions for non-nationals. She was also keen to criticise the Mobility Agency for the way they provide cars for the disabled.
We will restrict motability vehicles to people with serious disabilities. Those cars are not for people with ADHD.
The conference has also seen leadership contenders, including Robert Jenrick, manoeuvring for publicity, and with Badenoch under pressure to perform, it may not be long before another leadership challenge emerges. There's also the looming threat of reform, with 20 more Tory councillors defecting to Nigel Farage's party during the conference. Tory party chairman Kevin Hollinrake was trying to steady the ship.
We absolutely accept that we need to improve our position in the polls. We will do that. Kemi set out this very clearly thought out plan for a stronger economy, stronger borders. Over time, that will improve our poll ratings.
Last weekend saw contrasting events in Trafalgar Square on Saturday and Sunday. There were approximately 1,000 people there on Saturday protesting in support of the prescribed group Palestine Action, with police making over 500 arrests. The demonstration came despite calls from Cabinet Ministers and Prime Minister Keir Starmer to cancel the event as a mark of respect for those killed in Thursday's Manchester synagogue attack. Sunday saw thousands gathered to mark the 2 years anniversary of the Hamas attack on Israel. Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood announced on Sunday that she's taking steps to allow police to restrict what she called repeat protests, such as those in support of Palestine Action.
It is important, I think, that we make this change so that the right balance can be struck between allowing people the freedom to protest, which is an ancient freedom in this country, but balancing that against the rights of the wider community to be able to go about their business free from intimidation and fear.
Tory Shadow Home Secretary Chris Phillips was backing the new proposal.
Yes, I think that sounds sensible, and there may be scope to go further. For example, to look at whether marches that cause fear and intimidation should be allowed to go ahead as well.
Protesters outside and Courtin Junction have put asylum hotels in the spotlight this summer, with the government pledging to end their use by the end of their term. Details emerged on Tuesday, however, of one company who has been awarded a 10-year contract to provide accommodation with the Home Office, which could see them paid up to £7 billion. Lib Dem MP Paul Kohler sits on the Home Affairs Select Committee, and he said there needs to be much more scrutiny of government contracts.
It's a PPE-like problem. It's a failure of government to robustly negotiate with private providers. And suddenly, of course, once they had asylum seekers in hotels, there was no incentive and a huge disincentive to take them back out of the hotels.
Wednesday saw a major case collapse, partly because the government would not provide evidence that China is a national security threat. The Director of Public Prosecutions, Stephen Parkinson, said that the service had to drop charges against two men, Christopher Cash and Christopher Berry, both of whom denied the allegations. The DPP and the Crown Prosecution Service had tried repeatedly, but the previous Tory government had refused to label China as a threat, simply referring to it as an epoch-defining challenge, which did not meet the level required for prosecution under the Official Secrets Act. Former DPP and now Prime Minister Keir Starmer commented on the collapse of the case from India, where he's leading a trade mission.
We were disappointed that the trial didn't proceed, but the position is very clear that the trial would have had to take place on the basis of the situation as it was at the time under the previous Tory government. Now, that's not a political to and fro, that's a matter of law.
Cabinet Minister Emma Hardy says there really was no option because of a charge in case law and that the PM had no choice.
Absolutely not. Nothing to do with him, nothing to do with ministers whatsoever. That is completely false.
We're still a few weeks away from the next budget, but there's been no good news for the UK's consumers in the last few months. Inflation remains stubbornly high. The energy price cap rose again in October, and now there's more bad news as your water bill may also be about to rise too. It comes after 5 water companies, Anglian, Northumbrian, Southern, Wessex and South East, took a case to the UK's competition body seeking permission to raise their bills by more than the amount proposed by regulator Ofwat. They say they need a higher increase to deliver better infrastructure, and they got permission from the CMA to raise bills by an extra 3%.
This infrastructure is vital for our economy. It does need to be paid for. Investors have choices. They don't have to put their money into this sector. They don't even have to put it into this country. So unless we get that investment, we're not going to have our economy able to grow and our environment able to be in a better condition.
This week has seen Ukraine stepping up its attacks on Russian energy targets and causing serious fuel shortages for the Russian people. They're keen to get access to more long-range weapons too, requesting Tomahawk missiles from the US, and Donald Trump seems to indicate he was open to the idea on Tuesday. The missiles have a range of over 1,500 miles, which would put Moscow in Ukraine's sights, and Russia's Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov was warning the US that it would be viewed as a serious escalation. Meanwhile, Estonia's Foreign Affairs Minister Margus Tsarkana says recent Russian incursions into their airspace has not caused any cracks in their commitment to NATO.
The violation of Estonian airspace for 12 minutes was so brutal we haven't seen before. But I can say that it has not changed the mentality in Estonia and our region as well, because we always knew that Russia is an aggressive country. And NATO is working well.
EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen addressed the European Parliament in Strasbourg on Wednesday. She warned that something new and dangerous is happening in the skies of Europe as Russia probes EU air defences with fighter jets and drones over Poland, Estonia and Denmark. She also lifted Russian attempts to interfere in European elections and the ongoing disinformation wars waged on social media. She was taking a tough line though, warning Russia that the EU sees it as a hybrid warfare and that they will respond.
One incident may be a mistake, but 3, 5, 10. This is a deliberate and targeted grey zone campaign against Europe. And Europe must respond.
Russian President Vladimir Putin was on the road on Thursday, landing in Zakazan for a summit meeting for the former Soviet nations. Russia is keen to keep its former Soviet Union colleagues close, particularly as China has begun to wield more influence in the region. Unusually for the Russian president, he also issued a public apology, admitting for the first time that Russia's air defences were responsible for the destruction of an Azerbaijani airplane in December, which killed 38 people. He spoke to Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev and blamed Ukraine for the air defence error, while also pledging to punish those responsible and offering compensation.
It is connected with several circumstances. The first is that there was a Ukrainian drone in the sky. We were tracking 3 such drones on the day of the tragedy.
Still to come in the Standout 7, in association with Metro, Travis Kelce has some explaining to do, and we pay tribute to 2 British icons.
Right after this.
Hey friends, it's Nikayla from the podcast Side Hustle Pro. I'm always looking for ways to keep my kids entertained without screens, and the Yoto Mini has been a total lifesaver. My kids are obsessed. Yoto is a screen-free audio player where kids just pop in a card and listen. Hours of stories, music, podcasts, and more, and no screens or ads. With hundreds of options for ages 0 to 12, it's the perfect gift they'll go back to again and again. Check it out at yotoplay.com. YOTOPLAY.com.
Welcome back.
There was a tragic announcement on Monday as former England rugby captain Lewis Moody announced that he's been diagnosed with motor neuron disease. He's one of a number of professional rugby players to have had the diagnosis, with both Doddy Weir and Rob Burrows previously suffering from the disease, although there's been no definite link made between rugby and M&D. It's an incurable condition, so there's no good news for the man who led his country in the 2011 Rugby World Cup and earned his nickname Mad Dog. He spoke to BBC Breakfast on Monday morning to reveal his reaction when he got the news.
We sat on the couch in tears, Ethan and Dylan both wrapped up in each other, and the dog then jumped over, started licking the tears off our faces, which was rather sweet, but I can't really explain it because it was, without a shadow of doubt, the horriblest, hardest thing I've ever had to do.
Taylor Swift's Life of a Showgirl has been out for just a week and already it's set a whole load of new chart records. Not only that the making of the movie picked up about $50 million in one weekend at the box office, the only downside is that fans don't seem thrilled with the album and reviews have been mixed, to say the least. There's been plenty of intrigue too about the lyrics and how often fiancé Travis Kelce features across the album, with one song in particular entitled Wood. On their New Heights podcast, the Kelce brothers tackled the elephant in the room.
Do you feel cocky about the song Wood?
No, any song that she
That's
references me in.
That's not just any song. This is a very specific you.
I love that girl, so what do you mean? Any song that she would reference me in any
Well, it's not
way
just you,
or
though.
form.
It's an appendage. It's not just...
What?
It's a very specific thing.
I think you're not understanding this song.
The last week has seen the death of two dames, both icons in their fields. Firstly, last Friday, the death was announced of Dame Patricia Rutledge, who was 96 years of age. She was a versatile actress and performer, although she famously hated that phrase, saying it suggested that she wasn't very good at anything. While she was most famous for her role as Hyacinth Bouquet in the long-running BBC sitcom Keeping Up Appearances, she was also a star of the stage in the West End and on Broadway. She won an Olivier Award, a Tony Award, and in 1997 was named the UK's favourite actress. Back in 2017, she sat down for an in-depth interview to mark her 65th year in show business, and it's fair to say things didn't work out the way she thought they might. Rest in peace, Patricia.
I had an ambition. I thought that I would become a very avant-garde headmistress by the time I was 40, with a red sports car and romances all over Europe during the holidays.
Then on Monday, the death was announced of author and journalist Dame Jilly Cooper. She was 88 years of age but died unexpectedly following a fall, and her children Felix and Emily described her death as a complete shock, while the Queen was among those paying tribute to a wonderfully witty woman. She was famously known as the author of Bonkbusters, which included the novels Rivals, Riders and Polo. Riders was just successfully adapted for Disney Plus, and Jilly executive produced it. Before she became the best-selling author of more than 11 million books, she worked as a reporter and in public relations, joking that she was sacked from 22 jobs. She spoke to BBC Breakfast last year about how the world has changed since she began writing, blaming jogging for most of it. Rest in peace, Jilly.
I think it was less. They jog. Everybody jogs. They get up in the morning and they jog all around the countryside for hours. They do exercises. That's what they do now. They don't have sex anymore.
Really?
You're far too tired to have sex now.
Jogging is bad for people's love life.
It's ruinous.
You've been listening to The Smart 7. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. Hit that follow button and have a great day. Give us 7 minutes, we'll give you the world.
Hey friends, it's Nikayla from the podcast Side Hustle Pro. I'm always looking for ways to keep my kids entertained without screens, and the Yoto Mini has been a total lifesaver. My kids are obsessed. Yoto is a screen-free audio player where kids just pop in a card and listen. Hours of stories, music, podcasts, and more, and no screens or ads. With hundreds of options for ages 0 to 12, it's the perfect gift they'll go back to again and again. Check it out at yotoplay.com. YOTOPLAY.com.